Five, four, three, two, one. And we are live. Are we live? Yes, I'm just going to assume that we are. Whenever you are, wherever you are, thank you for joining the Design of Everyday People, where I talk to senior UX designers from all over the world, or senior designers in general, and where you get to ask them literally anything. So stick around till the last half of this conversation where you can ask anything and get your questions answered. But let's start by making this session as interactive as possible, so I know I and Sarah aren't just shouting into the void of the internet, which we do quite a lot, by telling me where you're tuning in from. Sorry, I'm getting some double echo from that LinkedIn video. Yeah, so just comment below where you're tuning in from so we know that you're there. But in the meantime, and before we start this session, I wanted to tell you about something new that I'm working on. Ooh, there we go. I want to tell you about this thing I call Backlog. Backlog is my effort to help more designers build their independent businesses. Why? Because we are the voice of the customer. My wish is to have more and also build more opinionated products that exist on the market out there. And I hopefully you feel the same. And really encourage folks and urge them to make what they wish existed in the world. That's the goal of Backlog. And to do this, we have a community, a group of folks on the same journey. There's also coaching, a thought partner to help you solve problems. And finally, resources, playbooks to help you do that, a step-to-step guide, if you will. So we have members working on agencies, solo agencies, or freelancing, newsletter, digital product businesses, and of course, personal branding and content creation. If that sounds interesting moving forward into 2025, if that's one of your goals, you can scan this QR code right here or check out backlog.design. That's backlog.design. And let's get back to the show. I always forget this, so I'm actually going to play the intro video for you guys now. This is the design of everyday people. This is the design of everyday people.
It sound right, boy.
Wow, I actually remembered that. Great. Okay, so welcome to How to Consciously Design Technology. Ask Me Anything. Let's start with quick introductions, and I'll go first. I'm Chris, the founder of UX Playbook and now Backlog. But before that, I was a self-taught designer struggling to get into UX. And now I spend most of my days helping designers navigate a fuzzy UX career with UX Playbook, from building your first portfolio to leading your first design team. But that's enough about me. You guys know me. Today, I'm joined by Sera Tajima, who is a designer, worked at companies like Webflow, YC, and Zendesk, a founder, The Craft, and also a climate tech investor. So let's get her out and find out more about Sera. Where's that button? Hey, Sera, how's it going?
Hey, it's going great. Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't you tell us a bit about yourself for the folks that don't know you online?
Yes. So, Sera Tajima, I'm founder of The Craft. I've been running my company for a few years now. Prior to that, I was working as a senior product designer at Webflow. Really great company, really fun tool. So it was great to work there. And yeah, since then, I've just been going on a journey of pursuing my interests. So as Chris mentioned, climate tech investing has become, one of the key ways that I spend my time now, as well as running my new podcast, so the Sera Tajima podcast. A big focus with my product design work on conscious design, conscious technology, as I sort of branch out, and that's something that we can talk about. But yeah, that's, I think, in a nutshell.
Awesome. So just want to call out some folks that said where they are tuning in from. We have folks in the Bay Area. That's cool. We have someone else from Mexico. Yes, let's go. And another one from the Bay Area. I think this timing is about right for folks in the Bay Area. Usually these
Yeah.
lives are out really early. So I'm glad that we see folks from that side of the world. Okay, so I again want to remind folks, as I and Sarah sort of touch around this topic, to drop your comments in and questions like as they pop up, because you might forget them and we can address them at the end. So, Sarah, how would you like to start this conversation? Should I start? Because I
Good.
have a doom and gloom sort of version of this, which
Oh,
we
no.
both want to get to, I
So
think.
I actually made a list of 50 questions for you. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I mean, I guess let me start then, if you don't mind. What is your perception of conscious design? Sorry, too hard?
Yeah. How long do you have? I guess, yeah, I guess it's like consideration first. So just spending a lot of time and thinking
Yeah.
about all the potential use cases, risks, knock-on effects of what this thing that I'm doing can affect
Mhm.
the world around me. I don't really have a better definition than that, apart from that it should be slower than traditionally we're used to. Am I anywhere in the ballpark of close to your definition?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, this is essentially why I created the podcast, to kind of explore this. And I think there is no one right definition. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where it's so new that I think we're still kind of forming an understanding of what it is and how we execute. But for me, it really came about because I was thinking really heavily about what kind of impact do I want to have on the world, and like what kind of legacy do I want to leave behind when I'm gone, you know? And I think you can probably relate to this, but a lot of times you want to leave a space better than when you arrived. And that might be something simple as bringing a gift to a friend's house. But it's that sort of thinking of like, what our actions, sort of like thinking about the impact that our actions have, right? So with conscious design, I like to frame it as conscious design for humanity and the planet, because I think that makes it a little bit more clear. It's like that could be really everything from thinking about accessibility, or thinking about ageism in tech, to thinking about climate, which is, of course, something that I'm focused on.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it sounds like you're creating a category of one. And so we're all eagerly awaiting the book Conscious Design. You're probably working on it.
Okay, let me tell you why my podcast is not named Conscious Design. I initially did name it Conscious Design, and I was doing research for one of my guests and realized there was another podcast already called that.
How dare
Right?
they?
I know. So, anyways, yeah, I actually do plan to write a book, and I have no idea what that will be yet, but I like the name.
Okay. Yeah, it definitely sticks, being someone that likes conscious hip hop as well. So I think close to my heart, that word conscious.
Are we going to be rapping here, or because I didn't prepare?
It's all right. I have an audio clip of you rapping anyway. If I pull it up,
You do.
I do.
You do.
It was
Oh
really
my
good.
god.
It
Oh
was
my god.
really
Okay,
good.
I'm gonna have to hang up now. No.
Okay, so let me go back to like the notes that I have.
Okay.
And I want to start our conversation, I guess, with one of the first things. Like, how does conscious design play, or like what is considered in when we think about sustainable design? What's the overlap with conscious design? Or is it one thing? Is it the umbrella term?
Yeah.
What do you consider that as?
Yeah. This is very nuanced, because I think you and I had this conversation on when you came onto my podcast as a guest. We spoke a lot about building a business. And one of the key takeaways, I think, was that you need to meet people with what they're looking for and what their understanding is, and not just focus on the message that you want to give. And so, something that I've really, I guess, the big takeaway for me when it comes to this climate space and sustainability space is, when I started, my lens of sustainability was so narrow, and I think that's the lens that most people have. It's called, for a lot of people who are in the climate industry, like sort of carbon tunnel vision, where you just have tunnel vision on climate change is this very narrow thing, and that's what sustainability is. When really, I think sustainability, and this is something I teach in my growth design course, which is why I think initially I wanted to call it sustainable growth design. And I think I tried to understand really what other people's perspectives of sustainability was in order to make sure that I'm meeting them where they are. But basically, sustainability, as I've come to understand it, is really like a full spectrum of things that has more to do with how we're, for example, building a business that lasts and not necessarily just thinking about emissions, for example. Like, I think a lot of times people think about sustainability as, I don't know, like being a hippie or carbon emissions, or, like there's sort of like a very narrow lens that we have when we think about this word. And in reality, it's more about how do we do things in a long-term way where we're really thinking about the impacts we have. So I'm from Hawaii originally, for people that don't know. And one of the great things about Hawaii is there's a lot to learn from Indigenous Hawaiians. And so there's this framework that one of my friends showed me where you're thinking generationally. So you're thinking about, what did we learn from the previous generation? What is our generation doing? And how is our generation going to then impact the next generations? So you take this like really zoomed out view. And it's very sort of systemic, like systems thinking, right? It's not just operating in a vacuum. It's really like zooming out and understanding how within a system, the action I take is going to impact every other part of that system.
I feel like there's such an uphill battle for folks working in like larger corporates where the almost the goal of sustainability is just to hit this metric of like
Mhm.
reduce emissions, or like there's some sort of
Yeah.
metric they have to chase. And if they don't get that, it means they kind of failed this goal. I'm guessing a lot of folks you speak to are in that situation. What do you say when they say, well, look, like there's just one metric in our org, and if I can't get that, it doesn't really mean anything. Or as a designer, how do I go towards the way that you're thinking?
Yeah. Yeah, that is a very tough question. So I think there's a lot to unpack there, because there's a lot of situations where designers are treated sort of more as pixel pushers, which unfortunately I think we all kind of observe at times in the industry. And so they're not even observing metrics yet, or thinking about the impact that their design is having, and the ability to measure that, which is why I personally found being in a growth design role, like as my first role ever as a product designer, very beneficial, because it really taught me, instead of thinking about just creating beautiful UIs, to think more about my impact.
Mm.
I think the second part of that is, to your point, I was doing interviews for my course, and I asked people like, so do you think about sustainability at all in your design process? People from all over the world, right? Like the US, Europe, India, and not a single person said that they consider sustainability in their process. And so I think for most people, it's not even something that's on the map yet. And that's what I hope to change. And I see this very similar to accessibility. Like when people started talking about accessibility, I don't think it was very easy to get buy-in for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think in the beginning businesses were really clear on like accessibility is actually a smart business investment, because when you make something better for, like, let's say 30% of your user base, you actually make it better for everyone. And like that's like a great example of that is captions, right? It was initially intended for people with hearing impairments, and that is actually now widely used by literally everyone. Like every time I watch Netflix, I have that on. So
Yeah, me too.
yeah.
I guess I want to dive into, what does sustainability look like in a typical, like an average designer's. When I say average, I mean like a mid-level designer's
Yeah.
design process. What does that look like, or what have you seen that works, or what have you tried?
Yeah. So there's, I think, several ways to think about this, because I think it's a very new consideration for a lot of companies. So there's sort of circular design, which is when you think about the product's entire life cycle, sort of from conception to use to being able to reuse, for example, instead of throw away. And, that could even be like with hardware. So if you think about using a smartphone, like you want to be able to have modular parts so that it's easy for people to like repair the battery instead of having to throw away your entire phone into a landfill and getting a new one. So there are companies like, what is it called? Fairphone. Yes, that's the name. Fairphone in the Netherlands that does that. But I'm going on a long tangent here, but I promise I'll bring it back. So with like regulations, that's also important because Apple, I don't think would have necessarily built a phone with modular parts unless they were forced to by new EU regulations that are requiring them to enable this. For a small fee, of course, people can repair instead of like just throwing away the phone. So it's things like that, but that's hardware, right? And so that's a little bit more removed from, I think, a lot of us here who are focused on digital. And I think there's a misconception that when you think about digital, that it's environmentally friendly and that there's no impact. But that's actually really not the case. So question for you. If the internet was a country, like at what ranking do you think it would be for energy consumption or emissions?
Number 5.
Oh, not bad at all. It's 4th.
Wow. Okay.
And that was like an older statistic. So I think that's even from several years ago. I expect that would increase greatly with AI if we don't do this in the right way. So like what we've seen, I mean, we can talk about digital products, right? So in terms of digital products, there's sort of like a green software movement where you think about optimizing code, you think of energy consumption, you think about using like a WebP image, for example, instead of a PNG or a JPEG. You think about like how much energy certain fonts consume, like a systems font is always going to be better, colors even. So there's like a lot to this. And then just thinking about, I think as well when it comes to AI, like the way that things are hosted. So hosting on, for example, a renewable data center. Mm-hmm. I've done like a lot of research now on data centers because I like write about it and I did an episode about it. And the thing about AI is that all these big tech companies like Google and Microsoft have these goals to get to net zero emissions. But actually, because of AI, which is what their leadership team cites, we see their emissions increasing instead. So it can increase from anywhere from like 30% to 50% because of AI in the past few years. And so I think right now what's happening is a lot of companies are just sort of trying to win the AI war instead of thinking about impact, essentially, right?
Yeah. And I think I heard something like Meta is investing in nuclear energy, and that's like helping them sort of win that revolution, AI revolution, because they have like a lot of power, like to, build whatever they need to build or to sort of run the engine behind it. And that's kind of crazy because if we think about, I mean, what is your take on nuclear? Like, is it more sustainable or less? Like,
well, it is zero emissions, right? But you have to ask, like, why haven't we touched nuclear energy so far?
My go-to response would be branding. It has a terrible brand image because of things that happened.
Risks. Yeah. Big risks. Yeah. And I think that a lot of these companies, and this is just my take, right? So I don't really know. But my take is that they're at a point now where they're so desperately trying to hit that zero emissions goal that now they're trying things that they wouldn't have tried before. And that means that they're trying things like small nuclear modular reactors. A nuclear facility takes like 10 years to build. Like it's very time intensive. And so by doing things like SMRs, they're trying to shorten the time to be able to use that nuclear energy center. But all of these companies like Amazon, Google, Microsoft, they're all doing major deals now with different nuclear energy providers. So it's definitely a space to watch, but it is a bet. So there's no like historical evidence where this has sort of paid off. We don't have anything to look back on as an example of saying this is definitely going to work. So it's essentially just a space to watch and see how it plays out.
Yeah, I think it'd be really, really interesting. And I wonder what the public would say about this, because I don't think it's like broad knowledge. And if people knew
Yeah.
about it, they'll probably start boycotting some of the companies, or at least give them, there'll be some public pressure, right? But yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I think when it comes to what companies are doing right now, there are companies running on like renewable energy, like data centers that run on renewable energy, basically, right? Data centers consume a ton of energy, and there's also water involved, and it needs to be fresh water. And less than 2% of the world's water is fresh water, which is why that's a big deal, right? So it's not like we have this like endless amount of fresh water. But there's like anytime there's some challenge, I think, humans find a way. And so there's new things coming out like liquid cooling technology for data centers. So I'm very curious to see how that goes. It's sort of like you could sort of make a parallel between like liquid cooling and nuclear, where you say, well, we've never done this before. Why are we doing it now? And with liquid cooling technology for data centers, it's because like, when was it a good idea to have water near your electric equipment, like your electronics? But now it's at a point where it's like, we need solutions. And so they're just kind of like, finding whatever could potentially work.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen people build their own PCs with like liquid cooling systems, right? I mean, it looks quite cool, and I've wanted one when I was a kid. I was like, oh my God. But yeah, you're right. I do not want that thing to break on a PC that you've built, because that would potentially happen. So
Yeah. So
yeah.
yeah, sorry, just one more example I wanted to add there. Like with Meta, you mentioned, right now what they're doing is they're building an entirely new data center. And what's happening with AI is they're building data centers specifically geared towards AI. They need to be a lot more like energy intensive and efficient. And so they're doing like a hybrid where they're enabling like some of these systems, but also still making sure that they're able to rely on like traditional energy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, crazy. Like, I mean, oh, at least with AI, it's like useful and a lot of people are using it. Whereas like crypto, it's kind of like this thing, and it's like energy draining. What even is it? What are the use cases? Like there are
Yeah.
some like fringe use cases. But yeah, like what's happening now is people are just treating it as the world's casino. So, which is, probably not a good use of energy if it's not that useful. I want to switch gears a bit and talk about what does a sort of responsible growth practices look like in your day to day when you're, running the craft,
Mhm.
advising startups. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, a lot of times it comes down to, like, I think where companies can lose focus a little bit is when they look at the wrong metrics. So, typically, a lot of tech companies will have a North Star where they say, this is like what helps us understand the success of our company. And, that could be like daily active users, or it could be transactions done on a marketplace. But essentially, I think, and this is also what I teach in my growth design course, because I am teaching growth. And it's like, why are you teaching growth if you want to talk about sustainability? So it's like more thinking about how do we grow in the right ways instead of saying, stop growing, let's all shut our laptops and stop working. And do you know what I mean? So it's like really thinking more, how do we grow in the right ways? And that often means decentering profit. So, not to say that profit is bad or that you can't profit. Of course, everyone needs to make money to live, and so do companies. But there are some boundaries when it comes to this, right? Like, even when you think of ethical design, dark patterns, you don't want to manipulate your users into taking an action that would hurt your long term relationship with that user, cause them to churn and go to a different company. Or even just decrease your CSAT, your satisfaction level with that company.
Mhm.
So yeah, essentially when it comes to growth, it's first understanding, are we measuring the right thing? And is that beneficial to the customer? I don't want to say user, but it's like, it depends what the company is. Is that beneficial to the user and beneficial to the business?
What are so apart from obviously measuring like revenue or profit or whatever, what are some of the metrics that you've seen sort of used like for responsible growth practices? Is it obviously it ranges, but
Yeah.
what are some of the ones that you've seen?
Yeah, it's hard to say like specifics towards a company that's thinking about sustainable and responsible growth practices. I just made a new word, but
Squish it together.
Shakespeare. No, so it's hard to say because I think it's more about understanding first your company, and a company should not exist just to make a profit. So there needs to be a clear mission there and a clear goal, and that's what the North Star is. But then it's more in terms of execution.
Mhm.
So, for example, something that I like to use is like this prism, where when you're thinking about creating a product and you have your PRD, for example, or even a feature of a product, then you're going through potential risks, which I think can be a common practice at certain tech companies, anyways. You think about the scope, and then you kind of go through this ideation process where you brainstorm, not just thinking about potential negative consequences for the user and the business, but also thinking about what are the negative consequences for the environment, for society, for governance. And a common example of this is Amazon. That's like an easy one that we use in workshops. And so it's not just thinking about like, you know, in the Amazon marketplace, like how does this impact our user if we do this? But it's also thinking like, how does this impact people working in the factories, you know, or how does this impact labor practices, or how does this impact the environment in terms of like fast fashion or fast shipping and those kinds of things. So it's like taking a very broad view. And I think that's almost where it kind of ties back into circular design. It's like, do we really understand from conception to end of life what is happening with our product and who are the sort of stakeholders or actors involved? And there's different, like, it's really interesting when it comes to systems thinking because, and Cheryl Kababa, who's one of the guests on my podcast, talks about this. It's like different actors have different sort of levels of power or perceived power, I guess you could say. So she does a lot of work with like the Bill Gates Foundation. And that means that they think a lot about education. And so you can think about voices in the system who are not often heard from, who don't typically have a voice, and actually actively going and like doing research with those sort of stakeholders.
Yeah, it sounds like it's touching on also service design, right? Because when you think about systems thinking, there's so many components to run the ship, if you will.
Yeah.
But the so like it's like a double-edged sword as well. Like, so one example, if we take the Amazon example, if Amazon thought holistically or more holistically,
Mhm.
they would probably go against like the one-click buy or deliver in the same day because it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
However,
Yeah.
consumers love it. Like, it's the best
Mm.
thing in the world, right? When you're
Yeah.
like, I really need that, or I want to get it on the same day because of, you know, a gift, because I crap at planning and I need a Mother's Day gift or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, in that sense, which one is more important, right? Like, how do you weigh this on the grand scheme of things?
Yeah.
Because, yeah, obviously, like, go towards what the consumers want, or at least what they say, or yeah, what they tell you they want. And
Mhm.
yeah, it's just really hard to sort of balance all of this stuff. Of course, it's, you know, nothing is easy, so to consider that. And how do you think you've had struggles kind of in the same like mindset as a business owner, where you're like, yes, I know this is good, like I want to do the responsible thing here, but like people are
Mhm.
telling me the opposite. Like, they're just saying,
Yeah.
I want this other thing. Sarah, just give it to
Yeah.
me, please. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I think you're absolutely right with that. And that's why we have this sort of cognitive dissonance with, you know, this is something, I guess, first of all, that we could easily say like a majority of the population doesn't think about, right? Like, give me my Amazon package tomorrow. Like, I want it immediately, or I'm going to go like shop at eBay. No, I won't, but you know what I mean? It's like this sort of attitude where like, how do we balance, how do we toe the line between doing things that are good for the environment and good for our consumers, but also not push so far that we lose them to a competitor?
Mm.
And I think like this is very complex because it touches on like society and culture and sort of education in general. Like, the reason that we continue to shop at Amazon is because this is not really a part of something we think about in the day-to-day. Like perhaps it's actually really not good if I'm receiving a package immediately. Perhaps it encourages consumerism. Perhaps it impacts the driver that delivers the package, or whatever it is, emissions for the plane that flies the package. Especially in my case, because I'm in Hawaii, so we're not close to anything. But I think for me, like the thing that comes to mind with this conversation is treating your customers like adults. And I think that means giving them like full disclosure and kind of finding ways to incentivize them to take certain actions or to be informed users of your product without losing them. So that could be something as simple as showing them like, hey, with this browser tab open, you're using like X% of energy, or your energy consumption this month with us, the utility was X amount, and this is how you could decrease it. Or if you're shopping, like, hey, this package shipped to you will take this much emissions, and here are 3 other ways. And this is actually done in the Netherlands. I haven't seen it yet in the US, but I think commerce is a good example of this. And I actually have a guest coming on for season 4 of the podcast, so I'm excited for that. But we're going to talk about basically, commerce and fashion and all of that. So they'll show you different options, and they'll actually recommend the option to you that's the most sustainable. And that's like such a simple thing you can do in the UI and enable in your business, while still saying, hey, you can get the package from DHL tomorrow, but we can also cycle it to you,
Yeah.
So if you want to quit your job and become a cyclist, you can. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I think it's funny. So I moved to like Asia like 10 years ago, maybe 11 years now. Oh, God, I'm old. Anyway, but yeah, so like, back in England, it's like, okay, you want strawberries, you want bananas, you want oranges, you can get it like pretty much anywhere, right? But it's funny, in Asia, it's like, oh, the fruit is in season, we should probably get it. And when it's out of season, people are like, no, it's kind of expensive, and like people tend to not go for that fruit. So I think like culturally, it's very accepted that certain times of the year things are more available than not, right?
Yeah.
So they're not like demanding, I want things now, and they'll rather wait for when it makes sense, right? When there's an abundance of things. And I think like as sort of Western consumers, we're just like, whatever, I just need it, like, immediately, because we've been at least trained in a way where things are available, right? And that we can get them on demand, really, and that might not be the best way. So like, that's just sort of one example I wanted to bring up about fruits, because I love my.
Are you calling me out? I'm kidding. I'm a Western consumer, Chris.
No, I still might, dude. Like, what are you talking about? The only way I know the difference is because I've lived in both places, and I'm like, God damn, pros and cons, right? Pros and cons.
Yeah. No, we both have. Funnily enough, that makes me think of like how much packaging is on everything in Japan. It's kind of ridiculous. Like, you're just trying to, I don't know, go to the grocery store and like they're wrapping everything in plastic. It's kind of crazy. But on the other hand, I think Japanese are really good about holding their own waste and not just like, this is just a random conversation now, but like the way that people will just throw their trash into the street. For example, in Amsterdam, a lot of the tourists will do that, right? Like, especially in touristy areas. It's kind of crazy.
Don't come to Vietnam. Like, everything is on the street, and it's like, dude, just like, put it in your pocket or something, or just take it home.
Yeah, find a trash. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, like, actually, that was one of the things I was going to bring up. There's like hardly any trash cans in Japan. Like, it's really hard to find one, because people are so responsible. They're like, no, I'll take it somewhere where I can dispose of it.
Yeah, you're meant to. And like, I don't know if this is a good thing, but I think a funny part of that is almost the social factor in Japan, where it's like the conformity in Japan is so strong. It's so homogenous that there would probably be a big amount of shame in you throwing your trash onto the street,
Not really
design at all.
Okay, I think we have a bit more time before we get to the questions. So guys, again, if you have anything to ask, just drop them in the comments or just spark some conversation around this topic. So what does Christmas look like in Hawaii?
Yeah. It looks hot, Chris. I don't know. I want to like turn my camera, but it's kind of far from me. It's very warm. It's weird. It doesn't feel very Christmassy when it's not wintry, and I think that's because we grew up watching all of these films where like Christmas is cold and snowy for, I don't know, part of the world, right? So yeah, it's just it's very different. It's a very hot, beachy Christmas.
Yeah, I was gonna say, is Christmas on the beach a thing? Because I'm sure in Australia it's probably a thing.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. I have to ask my Australian friend. But here, I mean, just the kind of things that you do are a bit outdoorsy, right? Like going to the beach, getting a plate lunch, hanging out with family. Like it's all very outdoorsy, very low key. So it's really nice to be home. Like I'm very happy to be home for Christmas. I mean, I also enjoy being in Amsterdam and being able to like really feel like it's winter and that there's lights and everything. But people here do lights as well. Like I have plans with my friend this Friday night to just go for a walk and look at the Christmas lights and like make cocoa. So I think it is what you make it.
Yeah.
How is it in Vietnam?
Lots of consumerism. So I live near a street where they wholesale like festive decorations. So it's really
Yeah.
funny. Like every sort of season of like festivities, we go home and we see the things and we're like, okay, it started. So it's quite again kind of hot, I would say. I mean, Vietnam's always hot. It's literally raining or hot. But yeah, just lots of decorations. There's a lot of people on the streets because of the decorations. Folks love taking photos out here. So like, you bring your kids or your girlfriend or your partner, whatever, and you just go walk the streets, take some photos of the decorations. So it's quite nice.
That's cute. Yeah. I really want to visit. I've never been. That and I want to visit Ruby in Thailand.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, on a tangent, potentially a design/creator/founder meetup that I might be organizing. So somewhere in Southeast Asia. Yeah. So if you're interested, we can see if that makes sense. And for folks obviously online as well, if you want to join like a sort of hacker house creator retreat where I was thinking, okay, let's just workshop this right now. Like on air.
Let's go. Let's do it. I want it to be a rap though. I'm gonna need you to rap it at me.
Impossible. But like, what would you want in sort of a retreat, like, semi-productive, but also chilled? Like, have you been to one of those things before? Like a workcation?
I have not. In fact, I've just discovered work-life balance very recently. So don't hit the tree. No. I have not, but I think like what I sort of picture in my mind is having free time, but also having like a set hour, for example, like 2 hours a day where we would get together and workshop like different business ideas, different content ideas, collaboration ideas. Someone made a Hawaiian song. That's cute.
And Joseph also said +1 for that. So if he doesn't in Asia, Joseph's in Singapore. So hopefully he can join us somewhere in Southeast Asia.
Let's all go to Singapore. Eat good food.
Yeah. Singapore's a good place.
Or we can bounce around. I see Grace bouncing around right now. Like she's been in Bali for a while. Just lots of traveling.
Yeah.
Actually, I think that's not the most conducive to a trip that's meant to be somewhat outcomes based.
Right.
Like if we're doing like a remote retreat that's meant to partially be takeaways for work, then I would think, yeah, maybe one location.
Yeah, exactly. Like I was thinking, like more of a quiet town versus a big city, because I think there's a lot of distractions, but also with some nice group activities, whether it's like cycling in an ancient town or going down the river
Yeah.
or just some like group activities, small town, but also get a fat villa like Grace did and just like host people. Of course, you have your own rooms, and then
Yeah.
sometime, and then obviously for the folks that come, I think it should be also they should also run sessions. So like not only are they the participant of a workshop, but they should also
Mhm.
lead their own so everybody
Yeah, that'd be
learns from each
fun.
other, right? Yeah.
True, yeah. I'd be down to do that. Like each person can do like a 30-minute talk and then a 30-minute workshop, for example, where you have practical. I think practical application is always really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But that sounds fun. You can come here. We can do a surf trip.
Okay. I think I'm just gonna drink a lot of salt water. No, no, thank you. No, I would love to. I would love to. That sounds
But I
amazing.
want Vietnamese food, and I think we should do a cooking class.
Oh, yeah, they can come to the villa and do a cooking class. Dude, it's so amazing. We could
Yeah.
literally get the best. We can get like, order in massages for everybody. Like, there's nothing you can't get in Vietnam, which is why I love this place so much. It's just, yeah, it's really cool. Really,
Do
really.
you ever feel, not that I'm hosting this, but do you ever feel like a bit of FOMO from being in a place that is not considered a major tech hub?
Absolutely. I mean, I think at the
Yeah.
beginning of my career, or at least the first few years, I was like, I need to move to Silicon Valley. I need to move to Silicon Valley.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And I would argue that there's not really a major tech hub in Southeast Asia, or I don't really know. Like
I guess
maybe
Singapore would be the closest thing
Singapore
to
would be the
tech
closest.
hub.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think I've looked at stuff in Singapore. I looked at stuff in Hong Kong, but it just
Yeah,
doesn't compare with the one in the US.
right.
Maybe because of the media where they just don't mention it that much.
Mm,
I did work with some companies from the Valley, and I felt like as my career progressed, I got what I needed, and I understood
mhm.
that it doesn't really matter. It's more of a mindset than it is the location. Although being in an environment where everyone's kind of doing exciting things, willing to
Yeah.
risk, is nice. But I would obviously love that. But I think like the one reason I really love Vietnam, not because it's a tech hub, but it's because of the entrepreneurial spirit. Everybody has a side
Mm,
hustle, and I
that's
and I
great.
really like that about Vietnam. And yeah, it's just exciting, right?
Yeah.
People might not be building tech, but they're building some other thing. Uh,
Mm,
so yeah. Mhm.
yeah. My uncle moved from Singapore to Vietnam to start a business there. So
Oh,
yeah, he's
really?
back in Japan now, but
Okay.
yeah, he was in Singapore for a really long time, and then I don't know, I guess the business environment in Vietnam was friendly. Like I don't know how it was during COVID actually, but yeah.
Yeah, it was one of the best places, and then it was one of the worst places.
Mm,
Yeah, it was extreme. Yeah, so there was something like a few weeks that folks were locked down, and then it was pretty chill, low like spread, so not that many folks were isolating. And
mhm.
then in 2021, actually, when I moved back from Thailand, it was one of the worst lockdowns in the world, where like um, blockades at the end of your like street, couldn't go out. You needed official like a document to go to like the supermarket. It was really crazy, and
That's
people
annoying.
started spinning up these Facebook groups about selling vegetables, and yeah, because you couldn't really get them. So it was like this kind of like black market vegetables online, and you had to like order from the
That's
thing.
so crazy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. People are hustlers. So
What a racket. Yeah, so I was in San Francisco for a really long time, by the way,
mm,
and I made a similar decision when I was thinking about moving to Amsterdam or yeah, I don't know, even like considering working in Japan or something. But I do get asked about that quite often, actually. Just,
mhm.
people that are interested in moving abroad. So I was curious.
Yeah. And what's the like? It was a purposeful move where you're like, hey, I don't actually need this environment to do what I was doing. Like, what was that switch like?
Yeah, I think for me, it was quality of life. So, like San Francisco, every city has positives and negatives, right? Like the benefit of working in San Francisco is that you're just working with like incredibly talented people. It was such a great environment for me to start my career in, to work at like all these incredible tech companies and to learn from really just like super highly motivated, intelligent, talented people. And that's not just other product designers, but like I've learned so much from product managers that I've worked with or talking to people in marketing or sales. So lots to learn there. I will say, I think the way that that is different from where I am now in Amsterdam is that in San Francisco, your whole life is kind of work. So, like, it's what you talk about a lot at parties. Everyone I knew at the time kind of worked in tech. And so I was in this very big tech bubble. Yeah. And, you know, the friends that you hang out with outside of work are also your coworkers in tech. And so then, like, on the weekend or after work, you find yourself still talking about work. And I think with Europe, there's a bit, well, I don't want to generalize an entire continent, you know, but in Amsterdam, there's a little bit more like distance between like now I go to work and now I'm with my friends that like I don't work with, for example. You still have that. Like I still have friends that I've worked with in Amsterdam, but it's more diverse.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think at the start of your career, it would be good to get fully immersed and just kind of go all out. But yeah, at one point, you're going to be like, there's actually more to life than this thing we call design, like, or, you know, whatever that job is that you're in. So always good. Yeah. Quality of life. I think in Asia, it's amazing. It's, yeah. Or at least from my experience. Okay. So, I mean, I just kind of want to turn this into me and you having a catch up, which I think we are doing anyway.
Yeah. Oh, are we recording right now? I didn't. Wait, are there people watching us?
So if you guys have any questions about how to design tech consciously, or personally for me or for Sarah, please drop that in. But I'm just gonna have a chat to Sarah because we haven't spoke for a minute, maybe 6 months.
I think we texted last week. Oh, you mean like? Oh, okay. I got you.
Yeah, we did text.
I rapped at you. You don't remember?
So, okay, we're in the season, we're in the festive season, but also when December comes around, people worry and sort of get antsy about next year. They got to plan, they got to do retros, they got to do this. So let me ask you this. Where are you on that spectrum? And, you know, what does next year look like, if anything? Have you got there yet?
Yeah. I definitely have things planned. I like to do, particularly since becoming a business owner. I think when I was an employee, I didn't really do this. You know, I was also a bit younger. So in my old age, I like to plan. And so I'll kind of do like a retrospective of the year and compared to what the goals were for that year. And then I'll look at like how I performed against those. I like to look at my finances quarterly for my business. I have 2 businesses. Right now I have the craft and I have my Dutch business. So that's like kind of complex to manage. And I'm trying to like, this is sort of the first year really. So I've been navigating like, how do I do this in an efficient way? Because spending time on finances as a business owner is a lot. And I've been better about that now. So I try to set time every Sunday morning to do finance stuff and like make sure I'm on top of things. But yeah, then goals for 2025, I think have a lot to do sort of with first creating like a vision. So I don't think that even needs to be anchored into anything that exists right now. For me, it's just generally like in an ideal world scenario, what does this look like for me? And also how does that align with my values and like who I am? So for example, last year, one of the goals for this year was to spend less time on social media. And I have successfully accomplished that. I'm still mad at YouTube for deleting my YouTube this week, my YouTube channel. But yeah, no, I really did. And I also didn't want to be spread so thin on so many social media channels. So I wasn't really on Instagram this year and built out the Substack and have been on LinkedIn. And like, I just think we have really great people that we interact with every day on LinkedIn, and it's a great community. So I really enjoy that. In terms of business goals, this year it was really getting the growth design course growing and like finding the right language around how to communicate that, because I am teaching growth hacking, but it's not traditional growth hacking in the sense that I do talk a lot about sustainability and impact and building a sustainable future, ideation, like all of the things, AI. We do a whole like workshop on Gen AI. So that has been going very well. Really excited about that. The first 2 cohorts that I did sold out. Wasn't sure if I would keep doing that, but for January, I'm doing another one, which is exciting. It gets like, not to say this in like a stuck up way, but each time it gets better because I try to really take in stuff from the audience. And each time it's gotten like a little bit bigger. I don't want to say more complex, but like I'll listen to feedback and people are like, oh, I wish it was even longer. And I'm like, great, let me explore what other activities could be useful, you know? So that kind of thing. And then I think personally, just like, what are my goals in terms of like the freedom that I have? A big one now is investing. Like we didn't really talk too much about that, but in the past year, I've done the most investing I've ever done in terms of like angel investing for seed stage startups in particular. And so I think the total combined valuation of the startups I've invested in is like over 100 million this year, which was really incredible to look back on. And I've learned so much from investing in these startups because they're not software. Like in the climate space, a lot of things tend to be more hardware. Yeah, just very like much more incorporating of different fields. Like it could be chemistry and like photocatalysis, or it could be how do we use mushrooms to create alternative footwear fabrics. So it's been
Have a fun time, right? No.
Oh yeah. Does this not sound fun to you, Chris?
No, I mean mushrooms to have a fun time, right?
Oh yes.
Sorry.
Well, is there anyone under? No, okay.
It's the lag. It's the lag.
Mushrooms
Otherwise,
can
your
have a
joke
fun
would have
time.
landed. Yeah.
Yeah, mushrooms are fun.
Yeah.
In your mouth or on sneakers. So
there you go.
Yes. But yeah, it's been really great, and I plan to continue that. So I have plans for 2025 that I don't really want to share until they're finalized, but that is the direction that I'm headed in. So how do I become an even better investor? How do I invest more in companies? Right now it's focused on climate tech. That could expand a little bit, but I am impact investing. So that's the focus, is like how does where I put my money impact the type of world that I want to see. Mm-hmm. It's that kind of thinking.
That's really cool. Want to dive into a bit more investing, just because I find that kind of world
we're really done here.
Are you like, is it your family office? Do you have a fund? Are there LPs? What's kind of the structure of that? Or is it just you kind of just being like, okay, I just want to, yeah.
It's not venture capital. Nobody in my family taught me how to invest or anything. It's something that I started doing, I don't know if it was like during college or immediately after, but I had seen other people invest, I guess. Like my mom invested, but just never like sat me down and was like, here's how to do it. But I was just aware that people invested, you know? And I think coming from a background where I didn't grow up with a ton of money, I was like, how do I put myself in a situation where I never have to experience this again? You know? So it's like almost like from a place of creating security for myself, financial security and financial independence, where I don't have to rely on someone else to provide for me. I mean, obviously that was my parents through like growing up in college, but yeah, it's that sort of thinking. Like, I think I'm just very practical in that sense. And so it's not venture capital what I do now. Like I started investing in the stock market through that period, also got RSUs from working at companies like Zendesk, you know, so like these different companies. I've also like invested in the companies I work for when you have to actually purchase it, which is less ideal, but you know, still a potential opportunity. And now it was just much more about, I want to build a business and do things that sort of help climate or help the environment. And an aspect of that was like where I put my money, and not just building the craft to help other technologists focus on this, but also me investing and yeah, I think I'm like, how do I not make this conversation another hour? Because I was like, there are pros and cons of VC money. You know what I mean? And like the whole concept with VC is that not all companies are going to succeed. You know that most of the companies in your portfolio are going to die. But that's not very significant because you're counting on just those few becoming really, really successful unicorns, for example, or a decacorn. So yeah, it's angel investing. I'm part of a group called Climate Insiders. I mentioned this in a talk with Grace, and someone actually joined after, like joined the group that I'm a part of, which was really exciting. But I think like a common sort of myth, I guess you could say, that I want to dispel for people is that you need to have a lot of money to invest, because you don't. You can start angel investing. There's tools like Wellfound, or yeah, if you work at a startup, for example, and that can sort of be your gateway into angel investing. You can start for a lot of tickets with like $1,000 US. So it can be very doable. And I think a lot of people don't do it because they think I need to be a millionaire, or I need to have thousands of dollars to invest. And that's just not the case. Like the payoff from doing this sorts of seed funding is like really high risk and high reward. So when you look at the stock market, and a return in a year could be like 8%, when you're investing, it's just completely uncomparable, right? Like you're looking at, I don't know, like it depends right on the company, but like you're looking at thousands of dollars back on that investment if that company does succeed. I think more than just the money, for me, it's also like the learning opportunity that this is, to learn about the technology, to learn about how this works, how VC works. Yeah, so it's been really great. I've made really good relationships with the founders. I get to understand how these startups work behind the scenes. There's companies from all over the world. So it's really exciting.
Would you ever consider investors for the craft or for what you're doing?
Right now, no. Because I don't think, like, I think there are business models where VC funding, investments, or government grants make sense. And there are business models where it doesn't make sense. And I think in my case, running the craft, which is very simple, right? Like I'm consulting, I'm running courses, I'm advising. Like it's not anything that requires investment. And I wouldn't want to give away control. So I think when founders, for example, are thinking about, do I want to take investment? It's like, do you have the right product? Is there a massive market for this, right? What's the market size is going to be really important. If you have a small market size, no one is going to consider you as a potential investment for, like, if you're going to a VC, right? It's different if you have like family or friends. But yeah, there's a lot of factors involved there. And I don't think that the craft is a good fit for VC investment. Yeah.
I love how our conversation started at like conscious designers. This is what you should be aware of and consider, and here's how you solve it, into like obviously some personal stuff, but we ended at like the bigger picture, how a business runs and what you think about in investing and what you do. Because I think a lot of I think consciously, or a conscious approach to technology has to start from that zoomed out business view, right? Where we say, how do we actually survive as a business? And then what are the inputs and what are the outputs we want? And I think investing is also one of them, as you were saying, right? Like, does it make sense? And how does this affect the business and potentially the customer and all the trickle effects that happen down the line? So that was awesome. I know our time is up. So before we go, you have something to share with the audience, and let me just kind of bring that up. Why don't you tell the audience what you have in store? Where is it? Okay, here we go.
Thank you, Chris. So I'm running another cohort. Very excited for this. It's going to be actually from January 6th on the Monday to January 10th. But I think those dates are different because you're in Vietnam, I want to say. So you're a day ahead of me. Yeah.
That's right.
So that makes sense. But if you would like to scan the code, I've given Chris's community and the listeners here a promo code so you can get a discount to join. And yeah, I would love to have you if you enjoyed this conversation. It's going to be right up your alley.
And I've also sent it in LinkedIn, the chat. So there's for some reason you can't click on the link, but yeah, so click on that link or copy and paste it, put it in the box. And the promo code is Chris, right?
Yes, it's Chris.
Okay.
Who's Chris?
Yeah, who's this Chris guy?
Who's Chris?
Sounds awesome.
I see John in the comments. Oh, for real?
Yeah, John always shows up.
Thank you.
Spitting the hot fire in the DMs. John was in one of your cohorts, correct?
John was in the last cohort. Yeah.
Okay. How is he as a student? Like, I'm always wondering.
Yeah, so I feel like he doesn't really pay attention. No, I'm kidding. No, John was great. It was such a nice cohort because I feel like I do a lot of group activities, like hands-on, you working together. I'm not a part of it. I'll just observe after teaching the content. And so people got a lot of opportunities to interact with each other and brainstorm together. And one guy said at the end of that cohort that it was sad on the last day to say goodbye to everyone. And I was like, that's like the best compliment for me, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, it was really great.
Okay, so guys, check that out either in the LinkedIn chat or scan that QR code, and I'll leave it up there for a minute. Any other? Actually, yes, I have the last thing. So let's do a PSA. So it's either a plug, share, and an ask. So the plug is Growth Design Cohort. What is your share and ask from the audience? What would you like to share to the audience, and what would you like to ask from them, if anything?
My share and ask? I have not done this before. What do people normally share about the growth design cohort?
So PSA, usually P is like something they want to plug, like, hey, check out my newsletter. A share could be something that you found interesting recently, or you're like, hey, have you checked out this new tool, or whatever, right? Something on your mind. And then an ask is just, do you have anything to ask for the audience?
Ah, okay. So it doesn't have to be related to the growth design course.
No, it's anything on your mind. Yeah.
So I guess something on my mind lately, because of one of the things I just saw in the comments, is the impact of the next administration here in the US on climate and on sustainability and like the things that I'm trying to do. So I saw someone, where is it? Oh, it's John. We switched our entire house to solar a few years ago. We now consolidated to one hybrid car too. I think like we're at a tipping point now where we've gained so much momentum with this that yes, Trump may come in, and can we talk about politics on this live? Is that okay?
Yeah, we could talk about anything you want to talk about. There's no safe
Perfect.
space.
Okay, I just want to check because I know sometimes people are like, I don't want to talk about politics. So I think, yeah, nothing is ever as good or as bad as it seems, is what I'll say, because I think people have a lot of misconceptions of what has happened under the current administration, where Biden could credibly say that he's done more than any other US president for the climate. But at the same time, we also saw oil and gas rise, the highest it's ever been under Biden. And that's sort of like a typical trend where we're like, great, so much renewable energy. We must be doing amazing. But then it's like, oh, but why is gas consumption still equally as high as it was like 10 years ago? So I think it's that sort of dynamic where when we look at the new administration, yes, he may try to shrink the Environmental Protection Agency. Yes, it might be a second round of trying to get out of the Paris Climate Agreement. What else? He might try to cut back on the Inflation Reduction Act, which was really good for stimulating anything related to climate and American jobs. I think, on the other hand, a lot of this is also in like the Republicans' interest as well for the things that they appreciate, like manufacturing, jobs, all of that, national security. So yeah, I think there's a lot of people that might feel a little bit of anxiety about that. And while it's true that he may be more effective this time around getting rid of some of the protections around that, I also don't think it will be as bad as it seems. Short take.
So,
That's my short take. I have more to say, but I'm trying to
Yeah,
reel it in.
yeah. So guys, it's not as bad as it seems. Everything will be all right.
Yeah.
What is your ask for the audience? Like, do you have an ask?
Ooh, my ask. I don't know. I'm not too sure. I don't normally ask the audience for things.
Okay, I have an
What
ask.
what would you recommend?
Yeah, just, next time you're deep into a project, or at least you're kicking off something, instead of just weighing the risk of what happens to the user or the customer, can you go beyond that? Can you look at the impacts that it could potentially have?
Yes.
What are the knock-on effects? What are the the layers to the onion that you need to peel? And can you then surface it up to people that also care about it in your organization? And I think leaving that seed in there could lead to a better conversation around what you're building, and be more conscious in general, right?
Yeah, that's a great one. Okay, so I do have an ask. One thing I would recommend is that when you're going through your ideation process, you use the sustainable futures prism that I've created. It's open for everyone on my Figma. So it's like figma.com/@Sera Tajima. If you go there, I think it's the latest thing that I posted. You can duplicate it. Feel free to use it. It's something that we use in the growth design course. And it's just a helpful sort of thought exercise in getting you used to thinking beyond just the user or business goals, so that you start thinking about this ecosystem, or you start sort of implementing systems thinking and thinking about negative consequences. I guess the other thing is just, to know that something as small as like asking a question about something that you receive, or starting a conversation with someone on your team about this, could go a long way. And so I think sometimes we put expectations on ourselves to think, oh, I can't do this because I'm just an individual contributor, or I don't have the authority to do this. But change in a system happens when one person does some small action, and it's sort of like a domino effect. So just by you questioning, like, hey, why are we measuring profit for this project, or things like that, it goes a long way.
Well, I want to thank you again, Sarah, for coming on and giving us your time. Yeah, it was really good. I mean, I love the catch up, as well as some of the important topics we spoke about too, that really mean a whole deal. As we sort to as we think about apart from ourselves, but society and the next generation, and then just how do we live a more conscious life as well as just design? Because I think we
Mhm.
should all be considering stuff like that. Okay, cool. So again, thank you so much. Any last words before I take you off stage and do the outro? Yep.
Yes, thank you for having me. It was great to be here. Everyone, Chris is actually as great as he seems. He's super, super helpful for the design community, and I'm sure that everyone really appreciates you putting these out here. And the other thing is just thank you for joining. Thanks everyone for listening in.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, gonna take you off stage. Don't leave just yet unless you have a hard stop, and I'll just do the wrap and we can have a chat after as well.
Perfect. Sounds
Okay,
good.
cool. All right. Bye. Okay, so just as we wrap up, I want to tell you about this. To listen to more conversations like this, head to live.uxplaybook.org or scan either one of the QR codes, whichever you prefer. And you'll get notified twice a month for future events. And I think in January, we actually have 3 events, maybe 4. Let's see what happens, but a bunch of events. So if you want to tune into these conversations and get notified, you can scan one of these things. And again, if you're stuck in your UX career and you want to, or at least you want help to get unstuck, check out uxplaybook.org. And if you're building your own thing as a designer, I would love to help you. So check out backlog.design. That's it from me. Until next time, I want to get Sarah back on, actually, see if this actually works. So I do this often, and see if we actually do this together. But until next time, hey Sarah, bye.
I'm back. What are we doing? We didn't rehearse this.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to see if you did it, but you did it. Amazing.
Oh,
okay, guys.
You want me to disappear?
Bye.
It's kind of hard when I'm sitting in a chair.
I know. I'm sorry. Okay, all right. Let's play the outro video. Bye. This is the design of everyday people. See that video?
It sound right, boy. It sound right, boy.